Putin embarrassed himself in public.
The fact that they decided to cancel the purchase of our bathroom facilities will cost them dearly. I think, in fact, they would have needed them.
The joke didn't land, so the dictator decided to complain instead.
No self-respecting country and no self-respecting people ever make important decisions under pressure from others. And
Also, Putin doesn't believe in US sanctions.
I'm glad he thinks that way. That's good. I'll let you know about it in 6 months. Let's see how things turn out.
Brutal live on air. Top-level journalism from Solovyov.
What kind of power can all of you, beaten by us century after century, this gathering of European nobodies possibly show us?
Did the dissatisfied finally get the message? Is Askabayeva whining about the sanctions? With the Russian budget deficit and war being an extremely expensive affair, the White House has announced a meeting between the American president and the Chinese leader.
On the morning of Thursday, October 30th local time, President Trump will take part in a bilateral meeting with the leader of the PRC, Xi Jinping.
A harsh blow, India and China have betrayed Putin.
Together, India and China consume 90% of Russia's seaborne black gold exports. Sky News called Washington's measures not a slap in the face, but a real gut punch to Russia's military economy. And
now, more details about this and more. Hello, you're watching the Ukraine Today YouTube channel, and I'm Vladimir Rabchon in the studio with you. Subscribe to our channel, give this video a like, it's quick and easy for you. It helps us and the algorithm. YouTube really likes it, and it helps promote our content. And now, let's move on to our topics. Refusing to meet with Putin in Budapest, devastating sanctions, and possibly even lifting the key ban on Ukraine's use of long-range weapons. Donald Trump is seriously angry with the Kremlin dictator, because he blatantly lies to him.
The cancellation of the meeting in Budapest, the green light for long-range strikes, using British and French missiles on Russian territory, and sanctions against the two largest oil companies of the gas station country. Donald Trump has finally seen the light and decided to crush Putin, what is really happening in the White House.
I've always felt that Putin wants everything, not just a part. I think now he's ready for negotiations. We don't want him to get everything.
As soon as the green light was given from the Oval Office, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee sprang into action as well. There, they supported 3 legislative initiatives aimed against Russia, which started the war in Ukraine. Among other things, this includes recognizing Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism and the use of frozen assets. However, the Senate itself admits that it's not possible to vote on these bills due to the government shutdown. Nevertheless, in just one day across the ocean, it seems they've turned toward the street and turned their backs on Putin. But, as analysts claim, it's too early to award Trump the Hero's Medal. Donald, as before, doesn't want Ukraine to win. He just wants everything to end as soon as possible along the current front line, pin a great peacemaker badge to his lapel, and shift all the subsequent problems onto the Europeans.
Trump is acting according to his own logic, meaning Ukraine wants peace. They said yes. We stop at the line of demarcation. So that's it. Ukraine is ready to take the shortest and simplest path. Russia doesn't want that. So according to Trump's logic, pressure should be put on Russia. What happened in the form of these sanctions? At the same time, according to Trump's logic, if tomorrow the Russians say, okay, we are ready to negotiate a ceasefire, they will go to these negotiations and will be ready to lift the sanctions and some other relaxations as well. He hopes that with the help of sanctions, he can get through to Putin's reason. He'll say, okay, we're losing, you're losing, let's look for ways to get out of this situation.
Trump, who thinks like a businessman, analysts say, did not take into account the main thing, the logic of Putin. A dictator doesn't care about millions of Russians becoming impoverished or about economic stagnation. He has his own priorities, and he has no intention of changing them, neither under the stick nor the carrot.
He lives for war, you see. The future of the Russian economy, oil prices, none of that bothers him at all. There will always be money for the front, there will always be money for the army, there will always be money for recruiting soldiers, and the soldiers themselves will be found, because they've been found for 3-4 years already, and more will be found. That's all he thinks about, and he probably believes that everything is going just fine. As for what will happen later when something collapses, when people start living badly, there will be no gasoline or something else will be missing. They'll find gasoline for the tanks, but everyone else will have to walk. That's basically his entire logic. He doesn't feel sorry for anyone, not just Ukrainians. He doesn't feel sorry for Russians either. So really, what is there to be surprised about?
So far, the only one to react to the demonstrative turn across the ocean has been the unpredictable Dmitry Medvedev, whom analysts say isn't even worth paying attention to. On the contrary, not a single word from any official figures. And most likely, in Moscow, they'll pretend that everything is going according to plan.
Obviously, for now, they don't have any kind of response. Medvedev plays the role of the bad cop and is rude to Trump. But as we've already seen this year, Putin and Trump are never rude to each other. They bow and scrape, they just tease each other a little. That's why I don't think that Putin, even if he makes some radical statements, will insult Trump or say that we're now enemies. He'll say something like, well, he got a bit carried away, we'll talk, we'll come to an agreement. I don't think we're in for something like him coming out crying and saying, wow, that's it, it's over for me, I renounce power, I've lost the war, new sanctions. I've been crushed.
Will Vladimir Putin be able to roll everything back? And will he fall for empty promises and stalling tactics? Trump? It's obvious to analysts that, unlike during the Anchorage meeting, the US president realized much faster that the desired outcome wasn't going to happen. But it seems the pendulum has swung. According to the media, India and China will be forced to give up. Russian black gold.
Joining our broadcast is the chief consultant of the Center for Foreign Policy Studies at the National Institute for Strategic Studies, Ivanas. Ivan, glad to have you with us.
Hello, Vladimir. It's good to see you, and greetings to the viewers.
The feeling is mutual. Ivan, we've gotten used to the roller coaster rides that the head of the White House, Donald Trump, puts on from time to time. This time it's actually pleasant to watch what's happening. But I'd like to understand what exactly is going on and why it's happening in particular. Let me explain. So, starting literally from Friday, no need to look far back, just a week has passed, Trump managed to announce a meeting with Putin, reschedule the meeting with Putin, and then officially cancel the meeting with Putin. A man of consistency. On the other hand, if there's more positive than negative, looking at it this way, it's a serious blow, a diplomatic blow at the very least, to the Kremlin regime and specifically to the Russian dictator. What is this caused by? What does this mean? Is this yet another turn in the development of relations between Trump and Putin? That is, until the next phone call, after which Trump will once again say, well, yes, it's time to meet, we can negotiate. Or maybe that last phone call has already happened, already taken place.
First of all, Vladimir, I don't think it has happened yet. I think Trump will still have more to say. But Trump is generally predictably unpredictable, in the sense that he likes to create situations where everyone expects one decision from him, but he makes a completely different one. It was the same thing this time. The only thing is, if we compare the meeting between Putin and Trump in Anchorage, Alaska, and the one that didn't happen. The meeting in Budapest, perhaps it will happen in the future, but not now, had a very important difference. Back then, it was said that a special representative, Withoff, flew in, spoke with Putin, and after that, Trump decided that the meeting would take place. The meeting was held, and Trump realized that nothing even close to what Withoff had told him was actually happening. So at that meeting in Anchorage, let's say, they significantly shortened it, canceled the dinner, there was no business meeting, and they parted ways. After that, let's say, purely by coincidence, of course, Ukrainian drones started flying more effectively into Russian territory, attacking Russia's oil refineries. And information emerges that the United States is not only not asking Ukraine to refrain from these actions, but is also providing Ukraine with the necessary intelligence regarding the location of Russia's missile defense systems. What areas do they cover? Which ones are better, which are worse, and they help plot attack routes to these oil refineries. None of this is accidental. It seems to me this was the White House's response to what Putin said to Withoff. On the one hand, Withoff told Trump that Putin was ready for this, but Putin did not go through with it during their personal meeting. That's why the model has now been changed. That is, Trump said, yes, there will be a meeting, but before that meeting, there will be a meeting between Russia's Foreign Minister Lavrov and the US Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. So they will meet, and after that, there will be a meeting between Putin and Trump. But Marco Rubio is a person systemic. Trump likes to say that he's fighting the deep state. I think that Marco Rubio is a representative of the deep state, at the very least, based on his biography, on the aura that emanates from him. So Marco Rubio, before meeting with Lavrov, says, Let's first talk to him on the phone, find out what he wants, or get in touch with his deputies. Let them discuss the topic of conversation at a lower level, and then we'll act. He gets in touch with Lavrov's circle, with Ryabkov, the deputy foreign minister. And what do they hear? They hear that Russia is not going to back down from what it has declared since the beginning of the full-scale war. Naturally, Marco Rubio, as an experienced politician, says, well, I don't see any reason for us to meet with Lavrov. Naturally, he calls Trump, or whatever communication they have. Maybe he even came in person to meet, and says that if you meet in Budapest, this is what will happen. Anchorage 2.0. Nothing new is happening. Putin is still sticking to his position. Donald Trump, as a businessman, has, let's say, a better understanding of the economic processes happening in Russia than Putin himself does. And seeing where everything is heading, Donald Trump says, well, listen, I'm suggesting an idea here. I'm saying, are you ready to go for peace? Are you ready to go for a freeze? Putin says that he's not ready, but why does Trump keep repeating this? Because it's not that Trump is hoping for something. This is Trump telling Putin directly, you have to agree with what I'm saying. Why should you? Because just look at your economy. Putin says that everything is great with this economy. But after that, Trump starts making sarcastic remarks. And Trump actually has arguments to back up these sarcastic remarks. That is, the Russian economy really is in a very, very dire state. Needless to say, in Russia's draft budget for the upcoming year, total spending on debt servicing exceeds the combined spending on healthcare and education. In other words, teachers and doctors will be paid less than what Russia will spend on servicing its debt. Why? Because the deficit, if we take 2022 as an example, and the draft budget states that this will continue for the next 3 years, it will be a 7-year deficit, meaning for every family in the following years, it will have a budget deficit, not a surplus, so the deficit needs to be covered. A deficit is a normal thing. In Ukraine, it is huge, but Ukraine has partners who help cover it. Russia does not have such partners. The IMF and the World Bank will not give Russia any money.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Belarus, North Korea, its allies do not have that kind of money. China does, but it is in no hurry, so only internal resources remain. But internal resources also have to be squeezed out of business analogs. Partially, this will be done by raising the tax by 2 percentage points, as will happen from January 1st, from 20% to 22%. VAT has been increased. There will be an environmental fee, increased tenfold. There will be a transport fee, increased, or rather a recycling fee. So here, Russia is looking for internal resources, but it's clearly not enough. So, of course, the situation is getting worse, and Trump sees all of this. Trump says, come on, you agree to freeze things, so let's do it. But Putin lives in his own world, and he doesn't want to, and that's what this is all about. This whole story with the scheduling and cancellation of the meeting is because, essentially, Trump is sure, he has the data right in front of him, that Putin has no other option. He will be forced to agree to a freeze. But Putin doesn't want to believe in this reality, Putin. He prefers to live in his own world, where, as he says, the economy is in fourth place. So that's why Trump will continue to apply some pressure. We will see what the next steps in this process will be. For the time being, Dmitry is currently flying to the United States. And as far as we are aware, he will soon be meeting and having discussions with the people involved with Bitcoin. And we'll see what he tells him. Let's see what Mikov will say. And Trump will be persuaded by Mikov to have Trump suspend the sanctions against Russia. Or Marco Rubio will be there, who will say, no, none of this is acceptable.
Okay. Well, yes, if there's no point in meeting, then it's a reason to increase the pressure. And that's exactly what's happening. We really are seeing this, yes, and both Lukoil and Rosneft are noticing it too. Okay, in your opinion, why is Kirill Dmitriev flying to the United States of America? And what are the chances that through that same Steve Mikov, he will influence Trump, and what steps would he be prepared to take? Right now, we're purely theorizing, but again, we've already seen similar situations in the past, and they ended with Trump saying, it's time to meet with Putin.
The first thing Dmitriev is most likely going to ask Witkoff for is to postpone the implementation of the sanctions. Let me remind you that they are supposed to take effect on November 20th through 21st, so that would be an additional request. Well, maybe for 3 months, so most likely there will be another Trump executive order stating that the sanctions are not being lifted. They're being postponed. but I think this will be Dmitriev's request to Steve Withoff. As far as, let's say, Withoff might hear this request and even pass it on to Trump, but this is exactly why I keep emphasizing that during the conversation about Bitcoin with Trump, Mark Rubio should be nearby, who will say, no, we don't need that at all. After all, Mark Rubio, I repeat, is a system-oriented person who calculates certain moves several steps ahead. Plus, once again, we see how even Trump's inner circle is changing its rhetoric, and not just its rhetoric, but its actions as well. For example, this recent permission regarding strikes deep inside Russia, formerly it referred to British and French missiles that use American components. The US is not opposed to these British, let me emphasize, American missiles flying into Russian territory. This in itself is already a precedent. But whether all this will be expanded, we'll see. Based on this game Trump is playing, this step against Russia should be followed by a step in Russia's favor and perhaps an extension. The introduction of these recently announced sanctions, the first ones I emphasized, there are actually a lot of them. What has changed systematically? Because Trump, after all, said he wouldn't impose sanctions since that would interfere with the peaceful process of achieving peace. That was Trump's main explanation for why he wasn't introducing new sanctions. And now they're being imposed. So the question is, does Trump no longer believe this hinders peace? Or does Trump no longer believe that peace is necessary? Simply because he realized that he wouldn't get anything here, that Russia, as Trump had hoped, would not become anti-China, that Russia wouldn't help take away nuclear weapons. There were also hopes regarding Iran, and when he realized that neither the first nor the second would work, it just wouldn't happen. Russia won't become anti-China and won't take nuclear weapons away from Iran. He began to take a tougher stance regarding Russia. Still true to his image, he goes and takes a step in one direction, and then a step in another. But let's see what happens next, because these sanctions, what else is interesting about them? The thing is, aside from the very fact of unfreezing the sanctions pressure, that is, the US joining in, getting back on the track of sanctions pressure, what's really frightening is not just the sanctions themselves, but the fact that the US has returned to this track, because sanctions are truly intimidating when their enforcement is monitored. It's like, crossing the street at a red light. A lot of people do this because they know nothing will happen to them since no one is actually enforcing this rule. But the US has the ability to enforce it. In other words, the European Union doesn't have the same capabilities and expertise as the US when it comes to sanction enforcement. The US does have it, and accordingly, Russia will find itself in a more difficult position, knowing that the US will be monitoring its sanctions. But there's another point, two companies. These are the state-owned Rosneft and the private company Lukoil. In other words, this is a direct signal to Russian businesses. Don't think that being a private company rather than a state-owned one will protect you from sanctions or from problems. From the perspective of the American system, you are the same, both the state and essentially private business. And the pressure will be on both business and the state. So look for a snuff box that will fix this situation.
Well, yes, a snuff box, all right. Okay, nevertheless, while Russia isn't stopping at all, I think there's no need to even talk about Russia's intentions. They're already clear. Well, at the very least, for the next few months, it's to plunge Ukraine into darkness and cold, to create a humanitarian catastrophe, if we use Zelensky's words, which he said during his meeting with Keir Starmer in the United Kingdom. The question is, how are Ukraine's Western partners, our allies, responding today to such intentions from the Russian Federation?
Well, of course, they understand what Russia wants. Of course, they understand that Ukraine will need more electricity. The other question is, first of all, how ready they are to ensure the delivery of this very electricity to Ukraine, and how prepared they are to provide more generators as humanitarian aid, which would partially compensate for the lack of electricity. So, look, at least in Kyiv, as soon as the power goes out, a huge number of generators are turned on, and life goes on. That is, yes, unfortunately, there is no centralized power supply, but at the same time, the lights in the shops are on, things can still be sold, so processes don't stop. Accordingly, partners will also help in this regard when it comes to protection. Here, of course, President Zelensky is constantly raising the issue of the need for these very anti-missile systems, and most importantly, anti-drone systems, because everyone understands that modern warfare is first and foremost a war of drones, and not just drones used to strike the enemy, but also drones that will shoot down other drones that gather around lights and carry out attacks. And in this regard, of course, Ukraine is communicating with its partners, saying, let's launch joint production. He already knows in Italy what they are planning to do, and the same goes for other European countries. That is, firstly, so that Europe would focus more on weapons production, which it hadn't done before, and which was a big mistake, because to a large extent, the inability to help Ukraine at a sufficient level is also due to the fact that essentially, after the end of World War II, Europe came to believe that there would be no war on its territory, and therefore there was no point in spending on defense. But times are changing, and as the former UK Defense Minister Sharp said, if anyone thought that wars only existed in history textbooks, that's not true. War is the reality we live in. Accordingly, this realization that wars are not happening somewhere far away, they are right at your doorstep. Among other things, this should lead to increased government spending on defense, so that in fact, instead of asking the US to meet NATO standards, perhaps those standards will even need to be raised in order to make NATO stronger. And here, despite all the ambiguity surrounding Trump, this is an absolutely correct approach. We need to care not only about the climate and other important aspects of our lives, but also about our own security. Otherwise, let's put it this way. You'll be dealt with by those who care less about other things and focus solely on preparing their military machines, just like Russia is doing.
And one more question, literally the last one. Just one or two sentences from you, Ivan, if you don't mind. Did Trump leave himself? There was room to maneuver in the situation. Afterward, while he was in Israel, and while commenting on the historic signing of the peace agreement that took place between Israel and Hamas, he made the following statement. This was a significant moment, and his words reflected the gravity of the occasion. There are still many wars out there, so we need to deal with Iran as well. But first of all, Steve, please focus on resolving the war that Russia is waging against Ukraine. So, after such statements, does he still have room to maneuver? He can back out. Or not anymore?
Trump can always jump in or out. That's essentially his whole nature. That is, he can say one thing and 2 weeks later claim, I never said that. Just like at the meeting with Armen when he was asked, did you call Zelensky a dictator? He says, no, I never said that. And then they find a video. Well, 2 weeks ago you said Zelensky was a dictator, and now you say you didn't. That's why Trump always has room to maneuver. He can always say, I did everything I could, just like, by the way, in the Middle East. We have a good saying, in the post-Soviet space, people certainly remember War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. If there's peace in the Middle East, when people talk about war and peace in the Middle East, well, there's always war there. And if there's peace, it's not really there. He says, I ended a 3,000-year war there. Well, come on, honestly, I'm not sure anything has really ended there, because from what I see, from the picture I get from there, and plus, since I comment for Arab channels, I understand that nothing is even close to being over there.
Yeah, that's true. We'll keep following how things develop. Ivan, thank you very much. Thank you for your comments and analysis. Ivan Us, Chief Consultant at the Center for Foreign Policy Studies of the National Institute for Strategic Studies, joined our broadcast. Thank you.
Thank you.